Hey everybody, Jim from Cigars and Other Dude Stuff. Today I am reviewing the My Father the Judge in the Grand Robusto size. And that is actually the number one cigar, the cigar of the year for 2024 by Cigar Aficionado in this exact vitola. And it gives me a chance to talk about ratings because ratings are very subjective, I think. I want to hear your opinion about what you think about cigar ratings and if you think they're valid, if you pay any attention to them. But I look at ratings, as I said, very subjective, also based on different things. One is the vitola. I think when you look at vitola and its effect on a rating of a cigar, you have to look first at the proportions. This is a big fatty. This is 60 gauge and very short, 5 inches. How does that affect the taste of this versus a Churchill, let's say, that's long and skinnier? And it has to do with, of course, the proportion of the wrapper versus the filler. And then what types of filler? If you have to have a lot more filler in a cigar like this than you do in a skinny cigar, what are you putting in for additional filler and how does that affect the taste? It's interesting, I was looking at ratings on Cigar Aficionado just this past week in regards to Brick House, which is a J.C. Newman brand. And they rated the Brick House Churchill as a number 10 cigar, and I think a 94 rating for 2024. And I was doing some prep for a review that I'm going to do on a different size Brick House. And I looked at the Cigar Aficionado rating for that, and it was 87. So that's a 7-point difference. And if you're familiar with Cigar Aficionado, you know, man, I don't think I've ever seen anything rated lower than an 84. So they're really dealing with a 16-point range there. And 7 is almost half that range. So that's a big difference for the same exact brand of cigar, but in a different vitola. The second thing about ratings, and I always try to keep this in mind when I'm doing reviews, is that cigars are a handmade product. Each one is individually rolled by a person and blended by a person and so forth. What that means is the roller can be having a bad day or the blender makes a mistake or whatever. And I think in smoking cigars like we do, we have to be a little bit forgiving of that. Of course, with cigars being expensive as they are, we expect a good product. But on the other hand, it is a handmade product and we always have to keep that in mind. The last thing I want to talk about in terms of ratings is a blind test really a blind test? So picture if you're a rater for Cigar Aficionado and you pick up this cigar, which is basically one of a kind, 5 inches by 60 gauge. If there's more than a couple other ones on the market, I don't know. And remember, when it gets to the ratings for the best cigars of the year, those have already been smoked a few times by the raters at Cigar Aficionado. So they've seen it before. It's a unique size. That's got to affect their judgment. And I'm not saying there's any kind of conspiracy or they favor one brand or another, but I think it's human nature and it's impossible if you know what you're smoking to not have some opinion about that. I actually put together a little chart where I'm showing this, and I look back at the last 9 years of ratings, specifically at the number one cigar of the year. Out of those 9, I'm going to say at least 5 or 6 are a little bit suspicious in the sense that they picked a cigar that had a pretty unique shape that stood out from the other ones on its shape alone. So it might be a blind taste test. There may not be any bands on it, but I think they may have known. So take a look at that chart and see if you agree with me. All right, that's all I have to say before I get this thing lit up, and we will see if this one is the number one cigar of the year. All right, I'm back smoking this My Father the Judge. And before I get into rating it, let's talk about the specs a little bit. It is an Ecuadorian Sumatra wrapper and Nicaraguan fillers. And it's going to be more common with cigar makers, especially the integrated ones like My Father that have their own farms, is they'll say it's the wrapper is such and such, and the binder and filler are proprietary tobaccos from our farms. So they just say Nicaraguan tobacco. Sumatra wrappers are grown in 3 different countries. Sumatra, obviously, Ecuador, and Indonesia. Sumatra, believe it or not, doesn't really grow that much Sumatra wrappers. They do some. Indonesia grows quite a bit, but Ecuador is really right now the shining star in terms of the cigar business for providing Sumatra wrappers. The Oliva V. Milanio, for example, has it. VSG uses that wrapper. It's much darker than the Indonesian wrapper, and the Indonesian wrapper is a little bit sweeter. If you're familiar with the New World Romeo and Juliet 1875, which is a very popular cigar and a medium body cigar. That has an Indonesian Sumatra wrapper on it. And I've kind of grown accustomed to those. I really like them, but man, reading the reviews by the supposed cigar experts, they don't really like Indonesian wrappers. But this one is an Ecuadorian wrapper, which is much darker and lacks that sweetness. This is about a mid priming, supposedly, which gives it a medium full strength. But let's talk about this cigar specifically. I really had a lot of wood taste with this. I guess it was cedar. A little tiny bit of earth, a little bit of nuts mixed in. But man, it was very woody taste of this cigar. I'm going to say the lack of sweetness, I didn't find it appealing to me. I really didn't like the taste of it as much as I like Indonesian. Maybe that speaks to me being, I don't know what that says about me, but maybe I'm just not used to the finer things in life. It didn't really appeal to me taste-wise. I have to say that. Construction was doing great. We were cruising right along until I took the band off. And as you can see on the band, I also took a picture of it. It pulled off a lot of the wrapper. It basically made it crack and everything else. And I also took some pictures of that. I fought it along down to about this point, and I think at this point I'm going to have to give up on it. It looks like it's going to not do well from here on in. Taste-wise, not fantastic. It didn't blow me away. In construction, what I talked about earlier, I'd feel kind of hypocritical now if I say I'm going to rate it lower for bad construction. You know, it was a mistake putting the band on. They put too much glue on it, and it ended up pulling the wrapper off. Let me give this a rating. In terms of body first, medium full. It had a tiny bit of spice to it, but it certainly isn't a full-bodied cigar. Overall smoking experience, I'm going to give this a 8.5. And again, that's just me. You know, ratings, like I said, are subjective, and maybe a lot of people think this is an amazing cigar. For me, it's a good cigar, not a number one cigar. Anyway, that's the way I see it. Jim from Cigars and Other Dude Stuff. I'll see you next time.